Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars. Hello and greetings. This is Sue Rose Minahan, Talk Cosmos, November 7th, 2020. A momentous day in the history of the United States. We do have a change of leadership protended for the next coming year, which really relates to our subject tonight, which is about Scorpio and the two rulers, the modern ruler and the traditional ruler. Some schools of astrology will take one versus the other. And thankfully, because of this subject that interests me greatly, I'm realizing, as I know many astrologers do, that both have total purpose. Mars has traditionally been the co-ruler, now referred to as a co-ruler of Scorpio. Essentially, in tradition times, Mars ruled two signs. Its natural sign of Aries. At the moment right now, Mars is in Aries and has been since June 27th, 29th, and will be until January 7th. And this retrograde period that we've been experiencing for a total of about 60 days will be ending on the 13th, 14th of November in a little bit, not quite yet. So Mars rules Aries and also rules Scorpio, the eighth sign and house of the zodiac, of the horoscope, until 1930, when Pluto was discovered, which really is less than 100 years ago, remarkably. Pluto, in recent years, has been recognized as the doorway to the Plutoids. Those are planets that were discovered from they've always been there, but we noticed them in about 2003, 2006, I believe. And they are outside very elliptical orbits outside of Pluto, the furthest being Sedna. And it's deeper consciousness. And isn't that what a lot of this is about? Well, we will pose so much of this because now it is time for cosmic collaboration.
Investigating the deeper questions of this month's archetype and integrating spirit and matter for unified wholeness, this is your Cosmic Collaboration Panel.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Shannon Hayes, a certified evolutionary astrologer and consultant, including Mayan astrology. I'm a stargazer and I work with animal spirit cards. I own a hair salon, I'm a nature lover, animal activist, and photographer.
And I'm Amanda Pierce, a soul-centered astrologer, astrological consultant, and empowerment-based meditation teacher. I have a BA in psychology, I'm a wellness enthusiast with a passion for healthy eating, and I enjoy creating new realities and shifting old paradigms.
And like the Sufi poet Rumi says, you are the entire ocean in a drop. Yes, Cosmic Collaboration is a panel that monthly is scheduled, and those people that subscribe, we will receive that. Tonight, our third member, Shannon Hayes, will not be joining. She just recently moved to Indiana and had a clash of schedules. So Amanda and I'll have lots of time to sit here and ponder these great motives and drives, which they both share. So hi, Amanda. This is a real treat.
Hello,
Always.
Sue. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Yes, we always have really productive headspace talks. You know, Mars was considered the god of war. It's, besides pure energy, the fire sign of assertion, separation. It involves our defenses. You know, what are we defending? What's the cause? And like Gemini Brett, I was just reading, said in one of his recent newsletters, what is worth fighting for? You know, that's really something to ponder, but it's always been with Mars progressively. Our actions, you know, what are we separating? What are we forming a new identity for, becoming? Whereas Pluto, god of the underworld, is the keeper of souls and has to do with wealth because it's under the earth with all the materials, kind of the finding the treasure, and invisible. You know, it's hidden, it's in the shadows. He wears that helmet of invisibility that the Cyclops, which is so interesting, isn't it? Because the Cyclops had one eye. It seems like it's like a third eye.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of a clue there. And ultimately about rebirth, regeneration. So they're both powerfully. Well, when I say that, of course, Pluto has everything to do about power or powerlessness, but it's trying to understand how they work in tandem. They do have different factors.
Yeah, and it's when you just delegate Scorpio to Pluto as the ruler, then you lose some of the complexity that Mars brings, because Mars was as you said, the traditional ruler, and this was before Pluto was discovered. So that's all we knew for Scorpio. And it provides just a different lens into how Mars can be. Just like with Venus, because Venus is the ruler of Taurus and the ruler of Libra. And that's still true to this day. Taurus is a yin energy and Libra is a yang energy. And Mars rules Aries, which is yang, and Scorpio, which is yin. And why not? Why wouldn't the traditional feminine planet and the traditional masculine planet both have a yin and a yang side to them?
Oh, that's delightful. You do bring out some intriguing, factors here to consider. And this, I think, centers on the primary realization as when I was considering this topic, which we've had for some time, planned, is that Mars action, which is foremost to Mars in Aries, makes changes. And of course, Scorpio is all related to that transformation. So I was thinking, like, even looking at Mars as Aries, Mars really, its operation of cutting away, forging, cutting is a lot, separation, which it has that, it can become the war, of course, of defense, but still whatever action is happening makes for a change. And I think it's that added consciousness of the yin, such as you're saying with this Pluto, that drives that within to, as we've spoken to among ourselves, of a psychology of why, of how.
Yeah, Mars in Aries, it's very focused on just forward movement and acting instinctually. It's not really thought-based. As Rick Levine likes to say, it's shoot first and aim later.
Yeah.
And so it's just really operating on instinct. And it's a very kind of driven energy. But when Mars is the ruler of Scorpio, it takes that drive, and instead of it being a yang outward expression, it's yin going within. So there's more exploration internally. And that's one of the things we know of with Scorpio, that it tends to be more psychologically oriented and more wanting to find the deeper meaning in things.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. It that emotional body. I like the fact of realizing the elemental difference and instinct and fire versus emotional context, of that, of relationships, of
Yeah, and why wouldn't Mars be associated with relationships? It's Mars and Venus. They're both the relationship planets. So Scorpio in the 8th house is often associated with relationships and kind of the deeper inner workings of relationships, the more intimate relationships and more like power-based struggles. And it just kind of all works together.
Well, it does. And also considering the whole action of Aries, looking at it from its in the sense of war, was always referred to quickly as the god of war. That's the trauma of any real separation. Later, and I was thinking about this because Pluto is the caregiver of the souls, all deceased souls. So there is a connection there to find out how did this conquest, how did it affect me? How does it affect others? Building how to, and as Brett often says too, when what is worth fighting for, will harmony ever be won in a fight? So it is that process of finding how do we negotiate true peace, the balance of opposing energies. It's not like there has to be 50-50, but somehow they operate in a way that both can function.
Yeah. Well, and Mars and Pluto both are known for going to extremes. So balancing that out, which is much more Libra, is definitely helpful to the process.
I think really too, looking at Pluto, I was reading another newsletter by an astrologer called Bill Herbst, Herbst, as a newsletter. It was actually I recommend it. He has many, many, many topics. So this one was Pluto roots out our deepest problems. And this is a quote that I just really stood out because it relates to the idea of impermanence, which really is a signature, I think, of Pluto, because it has power when it's supporting our life, soul, purpose, and powerlessness when it's no longer feeding what we need. And what he said was, what Pluto assassinates is our habitual expectation that reality will be and stay a certain way. I thought, wow-wee. Because right now, boy, are we in one huge 2020 transition of shifts leading us still down the river.
Yeah, and how much do we all want things just to stay the same?
Yeah.
It's if we didn't, then we wouldn't everyone be having such a hard time. It's challenging.
No. But that, in some ways, that makes me feel like we could cherry pick our changes, because I have to admit there's certain things because I've made some big changes and I'm pretty pleased with it. That isn't to say that I'm not in a process of, like he wrote, to focus, defocus, which is because Pluto, Scorpio is such a focus, it's very penetrating. It gets underneath. That has to do with I don't really know how Mars handled that part of Scorpio, though, before, about getting underneath things. I think a person ended up with it, but I think the consciousness truly has, well, we know consciousness raises, and that's the whole idea of astrology too, is that coordination with planets or different bodies that have been discovered is when our consciousness is ready to receive them. So with Pluto, we have really given authority or leeway to probe, to get behind that hidden cloak of Pluto, because Pluto always was around, but Pluto didn't rule Scorpio before.
Well, yeah, so we can see with the naked eye up through Saturn, and anything beyond Saturn is considered an outer planet and is considered transcendental, because anything that is within that, all the planets within that scope of Saturn are kind of reality based within our consciousness, and they're all visible. So it's all kind of clear to us what's going on. The outer planets are transcendental, which means they transcend consciousness, and it's not always completely clear what is motivating us to move forward. And that's one of the ways that Pluto and Mars then work together, because Pluto is, well, at least through evolutionary astrology, Pluto is the soul's journey. And so Pluto is looking to evolve the soul forward. And Mars is the lower octave of Pluto. Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. So there's a connection. Mars is looking to move forward the soul's evolution. It's called the leading edge of the soul's evolution. So it's really forging us forward, because Mars is a much more conscious planet. It's you may or may not consider it a more simple planet. It's just easier to understand. It's more straightforward. And so it's driving forward and moving us forward on our soul's journey. It's whatever consciousness we're able to gain through our lives, because we're always gaining new consciousness in some ways, hopefully. And so whatever pieces it's learning from Pluto, it's then going to put into action. And that's part of what is driving us forward.
That does connect dots, because it's that process. I'm thinking of becoming. I always think of Aries and Mars as becoming. And so it is a conscious step to break away, which Aries does. The first house there, that's its signature, is that leaving the womb of Pisces to individualize and find a new identity. And by the time it reaches the 8th house, it's really does that seed, whatever that seed would be. It could be a physical entity, or it could be a thought. It could be, there's so many levels of how this could function in life. Can it really be supportive of living by the time it gets to the 8th house? And that's when the transformative powers of, one's been transformed and developed throughout the whole process, as change does, and we encounter new steps. But yes, I like this key point of the conscious connecting with the unconscious, because each has a polarity. The 8th house has a polarity of the resources of the 2nd house. So it's how we exchange our resources with another, or a group, or whatever functions. It could be a business, a marriage, a deep intent. It's intense. By that time, it's really merged, fused, you could say, impassioned. And it's either going to support that life, or else, like a skin of a snake, it's not working, and so it's over and out. Which means you can ditch the idea, or sometimes it's an ending of a relationship, or ending of even a life.
Well, and that makes me think of the the definition for metamorphosis. When I looked that up, what I found really interesting is when you're looking at the definition per zoology, so this is for an insect or an amphibian, it says that metamorphosis is the process of transformation from an immature form to an adult form in 2 or more distinct stages. And I just thought that was so interesting, that the shifting, moving from immature form to an adult form, that was part of metamorphosis. And that just seems to fit really well with the evolution of the soul.
And stages, yes. It's always good to break things down into these incremental moments, which really brings forth this entire idea that looking at astrology is so marvelous, especially as tracking it, because this year and especially we've had pivotal changes that are moving us, whether it's like on an iceberg or a roller coaster. It's like, oh my gosh, many forms towards this transformative shifts. So 2 stages, and in
2
between,
or more.
2 or more. Okay, so it's yes.
Yeah, because with us humans, there's more than 2.
I know. And I had a dear friend, much older. She's deceased. I don't know when she would have been born, but probably in the early 1900s. And she became a Baha'i, and she would often say that, as a school of thought, that when we go through school and when we become in 4th grade, we don't throw out what we knew in kindergarten, we just build on it. And when we go into 8th grade, the same, we don't throw out what we knew in 6th grade. And it progresses. So really, this idea that I am really enthused to realize that, to look at both rulers, that Mars, through its action, the seed idea, that's how we get back to what was that seed. Because just like any plant, if it wasn't potted well, or if it wasn't in the right amount of sunshine or too much water, who knows? It's not going to function. And you have a choice: either ditch it and do compost, or give it what it needs. But
yeah, I love the idea of Scorpio having 2 rulers. It's a big energy, Scorpio. So it really can handle that complexity of 2 rulers. And having 2 rulers allows you to look at the energy in different ways. So with Mars, you're looking at it on a more conscious level. Like, it can penetrate deeply and be very driven to understanding things that way. But with Pluto, it's really, there's more of an that unconscious drive, that there's just more to everything. Yeah, I'll have to think about how better to phrase that.
Well, Maurice Fernandez, who I do make reference to, is a primary teacher of mine, having gone through his course, which I'm still studying, and I listened to, but he brings up the word hunger, that Scorpio is hungry, and more is a huge word for Scorpio, because it wants life. Even though it works on that basis of life and death, it's really trying to avoid death. It wants life.
Right.
And so it is never satisfied. It really has that idea of lack, because it wants power. And so it's amazing, because we can look at these in their pure forms, and then again, it's like, to what, we look at the opposite of Taurus, that we brought up values. It's like, what value system do we have? Because if it's wealth, well, there may be just unbelievable wealth, but yet again, on what basis is wealth? What basis of abundance? It could be wealth of heart, the wholeness of a person. It's But yes, hunger and more. It's very essential.
Yeah, it's that's interesting because it does relate to Aries in a way. Aries is hungry, but it's hungry on a different level. It's hungry more for like basic sustenance. Anne Orderly likes to say that Aries is about meat, malt, and mattress. So it's about food, alcohol, and sex.
Oh,
Like that's what it wants.
fuel. Fuel. It's because it's energy. It wants fuel. I know that the fire signs love fire. And as many friends that I care for are fire oriented, I realize when I see two, even though all my air gives that fire, when I see two fire together, it's like, wow, there's just like, we're burning. And so it wants fuel. I think that's where it is. It's that energy, that sense of energetic thrust. It's assertion. It takes a lot of energy to go forward. It takes power and bravery and a lot of things, which actually gets back into like, what are these two? Because Mars is that forward push, that action motivation, and which isn't afraid. In fact, it relishes separation. It's not necessarily a leader per se, except people follow because they're a pioneer. They're going forward somewhere. And other people who have maybe been fearful are like, oh, there's the way has been cut, like the path in the grass. Let's follow. And whereas
there's an interesting dynamic with between Mars and Pluto where there's kind of a push-pull dynamic where Mars wants to separate and Pluto wants to kind of merge together with that Scorpio energy.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, and we're all doing that all the time. Maybe not all the time, but it's something that's going to come up for everybody where we want to separate out and be our own. And then there are periods where we want to kind of merge back in with the other.
And with this retrograde, I think that's a real cue and clue to it. And because by just becoming aware of that dynamic, which I think actually is very intricate, it helps alleviate some of the frustration when actions, because they do involve so many other people, are complex and need to be adjusted, which we've been experiencing with this retrograde. We will be right back. This is Talk Cosmos with Amanda Pierce at Cosmic Collaboration, talking about Scorpio guides, the rulers, the guides, Mars and Pluto. Thank you. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Scorpio, traditionally ruled by Mars, now ruled by Pluto. By departing a cycle based on comparison between extreme energies finding balance, Scorpio commits a relationship to exchange resources, experiencing power and powerlessness for the purpose of soul growth transformation. As a fixed water sign that is extreme, intense, and secretively deep, Scorpio's passionate nature questions the psychology and mystery concerning life and death.
This is Susie Kerr-Wright, astrologer and psychic medium, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaning of our roots in the stars.
An alternative to everything else on your radio dial. Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi again. Yes, Sue Rose Minahan, November 7th. And we're continuing this really vital conversation about Mars and Pluto. And, Scorpio energy, it empowers us. And what must be totally purged for a new regeneration of life. And in fact, right now, I'm hearing firecrackers. It has been quite a day. Now, we realize that there's a lot of polarity. Not everybody feels the same way with this presidential election. But we will go into not the politics of it, but something about the backbone of it, right? I mean, in other words, that's what we're talking about. Scorpio is but I say backbone, it's the hidden part actually here. Backbone may not be quite so different because Pluto happens to be right now in the sign of transiting the sign of Capricorn. However, what we're going to, Amanda Pierce and I are going to talk about is the USA natal chart and a few measurement systems that astrologers apply. The progressive and the solar arc. The progressive measures one day at a time. So its system of changing, that's from the natal chart, goes at a much more rapid pace. And what's important is looking at the inner planets. Mercury, Mars, Venus, I'm not saying them in order here, and the moon particularly. The outer planets from Jupiter on really, because they have a much longer orbit, they don't move as quickly. And so it is more on a personal basis of this change, progressive. And the moon, as we're talking about, is our emotional context. The moon relates the reflected process of light. Now, the solar arc is another system, and one becomes evident how this applies as you study astrology. But just to give a brief analysis or description of it, it's 1 degree a year. So every 30 years, it's going to move 30 degrees from wherever it started. And it takes a long time, and the entire chart moves from the sun. So it's called solar, the sun, right? Solar arc. And in both of them, the sun moves at the same direction. But again, the progressive is 1 day at a time. So the point being...
Well, 1 day for a year. That's the progressed chart.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. Okay.
And that's why you really only look at the inner planets, because for each year of your life, it just moves that much forward. Or I'm sorry, I'm going to say it again. I always get this mixed up in when I try to explain it. So when you're born, the moon is in a certain placement, and the moon changes signs about every 2.5 days. So the progressed moon is an evolution of your emotional journey, because the moon is emotional, but it's going to move each year. It moves forward about a day's journey. So whereas the transiting moon at the time of your birth is going to move forward or change signs in about 2.5 days, depending on what degree your moon is at. Your progressed moon will take 2.5 years to move through that sign. So the outer planets, the farther out, the longer the planet takes to transit through a sign, the longer it's going to take to progress forward in your progressed chart. And so the outer planets really barely even move. They might move a couple degrees because they're just...
Right. Yeah, it just isn't something we look at.
It just isn't something we look at. Yeah. So the solar arc chart is really helpful when you want to get an idea of your evolutionary journey with the outer planets.
Well, what's amazing about solar arc is its timing. It is incredible. It only happens once in a lifetime. I mean, for people. Now we're talking about a country. So, but even then, it's once in. It's very, very irregular. But in a person's life, when that planet connects, well, let's just go on with what we were talking about, because we can't teach everybody all night long. But because the point is that October 29th, just a couple weeks ago, the progressed moon, and we're talking only about the moon in this case, change signs, which is a big deal. It's always a new lens that's been looking, and it was on the 29th, and we're basing it from Philadelphia. That's where
this is for the United States, though.
Right.
So the progressed moon of the United States.
Yeah, and that was at 11:54, 11 in the morning, 11 o'clock, 54 minutes and 37 seconds. 11 o'clock, 54 minutes, 37 minutes. So in other words, the moon, after 2.5 years, because this has progressed, went to 0 degrees Aquarius. Now you can put that on a bi-wheel, and I am right now. It's most amazing because also at that point, Amanda, we hadn't talked about that, but because we were going to bring up about the solar arc. So I will do that. The solar arc on December 9th it will move 1 degree a year at 0 degrees Scorpio. And that will be at 4 o'clock in the morning, 35 minutes, 37. So the point is that, I mean, there's many relationships to see here, but we were talking about transition, and we're talking about metamorphosis and this long process of transformation. And just those two are exactly square. They're fixed signs, and it represents, we were realizing how demonstrative it is of the experience the United States is feeling, and not just feeling, but expressing through their senses of merged relationships of deep intensity of Scorpio with this the higher elevation of improvement through the brotherhood in a sense of Aquarius.
And when you're looking at a chart like a United States chart, a chart for a country, it's considered a mundane chart, and the moon represents the public. So this is kind of where the public stands emotionally. And so with a progressed moon moving right into Aquarius and a solar arc moon moving into Scorpio, both of them represent the public, but you can see how with them squaring each other, that square energy, how there's like a divided public. And both Scorpio and Aquarius are fixed signs. And so they're really just like set in their standing. And it's just very telling about where we are at the moment.
And it goes
not only that, but the United States Pluto, I believe, is at 27 or 28.
Yes, no, 27 degrees and 10 minutes. Because I'm looking at the chart right now.
The progressed Pluto is at 29 degrees 28 minutes in Capricorn. So it's right there in the mix as well. Even though the progressed moon has moved into Scorpio, it's still conjunct that Pluto, and the solar arc moon is then squaring that Pluto as well. So, I don't know how many times I've heard people saying like, this is a fight for the soul of the nation.
Yes,
Pluto represents the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also see like how little Pluto has actually moved since 1776. It's moved like 2 degrees.
Exactly.
So it's like you don't really look at it all that much, but with a country chart, it's
But the fact is that right
it's
now,
a little easier to see things.
Well, really looking at this chart as I am right now, bringing those factors up, is the fact that it doesn't matter. Pluto hasn't changed. Okay, that's fine. But the inner planets do. So our emotional context of the public, which you brought up, is now emotionally at a point where Pluto is relentless. It's just like Pluto took Persephone. We don't have any choice. We are in this process of transformation. So realizing the dynamics, is so vital. And realizing too, Pluto wants our soul growth, and it it is really going back, because it is, there's so many elements here, but it's going back to the very beginning, the seed point of the natal chart. And right here, the moon, well, no, it wasn't that actually. With that point that you brought up is perfect, but the I'm looking here too, Amanda, that the south node in this progressed chart is conjunct the natal Pluto. So we are really releasing a lot and deconditioning and defocusing. Focus for Pluto, conditioned for Capricorn. We're in this process of really scrutinizing. And it's not just Virgo analytical, it's deep psychology, getting down there and getting to the root of things.
Okay.
To find out.
And so, and just to clarify, it's the progressed south node that you're seeing.
Yes.
That's conjunct the natal Pluto in the US chart,
Yeah,
right?
I just pulled it up and did a by wheel on it. So that is, and the other really significant thing here is that the progressed Jupiter is actually at 15 degrees of Cancer, and our natal sun on the 4th of July is 13 degrees Cancer. So in progressed, they can have an orb. It's not like solar arcs where that becomes a whole nother issue. But here, it's, so we are looking at our expanded Cancer, our home, our personal, our family, our tribe, our belief systems. It can be very righteous. It can be very protective. It can be, they're not quite conjunct. They're natally, they're all in Cancer. But in this point, so we have, this is a very dynamic, meant to be time where we can look at.
Yeah, and it's bringing forward that Cancer energy for us, even if they're not exactly, if the conjunction is exact, it's still really highlighting the Cancer energy, and we've got that the Capricorn energy highlighted as well with the Pluto there, and we just had the progressed moon move through Capricorn for the last 2.5 years. So it's we're working through some family patterns as a country, you could say.
Yes, indeed, we are.
Yeah.
And yes, exactly. And on a large belief system basis. And of course, there's a lot of opinions. Jupiter does express itself. And right now, the nodes, just adding that factor that we're at this natural time where the nodes, the path of the moon and the sun intersect, have, as of May, went from North Node Cancer to North Node Gemini, meaning that South Node is Sagittarius. So we are releasing, trying to get more information to find out how to reframe a broader, more truthful belief system. And it is painful. I will identify with that because, Cancer is very attached. Cancer, for a good purpose, holds on. And so we have many family stories, and it's our story, but gee whiz, what a great time to reframe that story, because with new information,
well, and so we had the progressed moon just moving through Capricorn, right, for the last 2.5 years, and that's very tradition based as well. It's right in that continuum with Cancer, and with the moon moving into Aquarius, that all of the signs in the zodiac, they kind of progress forward. Like you learn something from one of them, and then when you move into the next sign, you're in a bit of a reaction state. to the last sign. You're like, oh, I'm done with that.
Oh, yes, that's
I want to
right.
shift and change. And Aquarius is all about shifting and changing. And
Breaking the
it's
routine. Yes.
breaking the routine, breaking traditions, moving forward progress. So it's interesting that the progressed moon moved into Aquarius a couple days before the presidential election.
Yeah, and we
And
want to be authentic. Everybody wants authenticity, which means I think really it is there is this huge other aspect of inclusiveness, which we could pull into the chart in different places, but that's a real big theme.
yeah, I wonder if the progressed moon moving into Aquarius a couple days before the election had an impact at all on the mood of the people and how they voted. Don't know.
Well, it's subtle. It's subtle. And well, let's look at we have another one that we're going to talk about today, and that's the solar arc. Now, this is like a 30-year cycle of measurement. I mean, this is a measurement process. Whereas, just to reiterate, we were talking about progressive, so that the moon and the progressive moon had for 2.5 years been in Capricorn. Interestingly, the same time as perhaps you were just saying that Saturn was also in its own sign. So we were very conditioned and looking at family values of tradition. But now it's breaking, and this square, this by degree it's a square, but it will be exact come December 9th, which is so interesting because it's just before Saturn enters Aquarius, and then I think it enters it on the 12th, and then on the 21st, the cycle of Jupiter conjunct Saturn, which happens every 20 years, is going to be very momentous because it'll be in Aquarius, which is heralding a 200-year element cycle in air. So we're leaving another death, you could say, leaving the material where what you see is what you get, and expecting this form of permanence to the impermanence and the fluidity of air that is of the more intangible ideas and whole other factors.
Yeah, and so we've been going through this big Capricorn period. We've had Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto all in Capricorn, and we've been working through this. And now with Jupiter moving along to Aquarius and then Saturn quickly following behind, this is shifting everything out of Capricorn except for Pluto. And so with that Jupiter Saturn conjunction on the 21st, that really it's ushering in the new air era, like you said, Sue, but also just we're going to feel it, I think, a lot more because of all the planets moving out of Capricorn.
Yes, that's it. Now with this, just to throw in some extra info, because I'm staring now at the bi-wheel, the USA Sibley chart, July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m. Philadelphia, with the other outer wheel now that we've imposed on December 9th of this year. That's the solar arc direction, which happens to be at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's 35 minutes and 37 seconds to be exact in Philadelphia. And so it doesn't have any direct aspects. However, our conversation earlier this summer, or I think just last month was Pluto. Solar arc Pluto had just entered Libra. So yes, we have all that Capricorn still with the actual transiting at this moment as real time transiting. Pluto is in measuring from Earth in Capricorn, but the solar arc is in Pluto, meaning as an overlay, it's really looking at relationships. So we're now looking at relationships also interestingly from two angles, because the moon, and these are going to be in there for 30 years. So this is a huge emphasis of our whole orientation, which is brand fresh. I mean, 0 degrees is like the baby beginning, and it can be very beautifully inspiring at that point, because what do we know? We have a lot of dreams and hopes, and I mean, as any seed beginning has of intention. But with that moon in Scorpio, it is intense. We want to change according to the other person. We're realizing we need to adjust to the other person, complement, but yet emotionally we want that fusion. We want it, that growth. We see that lack. We want that life. It's serious.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the moon in Scorpio is, you can look to Pluto as its ruler. And so not only is the moon itself shifting into Scorpio, but Pluto is shifting into a new sign. So this is a whole new, there's going to be a whole new flavor to how we as the public in the United States are feeling and operating and seeing our world.
Oh, you know what? I'm looking at it a little further, because when you mentioned Pluto, I thought, okay, well, tonight's conversation is about Mars also. In that solar arc, that's 30-year process, Mars is at 24 degrees Aquarius. So that, in a sense, on some layer, and it'll remain there for 6 years in Aquarius until it goes into the next sign, following sign. But in a sense, that will bring in that attention that our progressed moon, that's also in, I mean, they're both going to be looking at Uranus and Saturn, if we continue on this theme of two rulers. So it's going to be how can we improve? How can we break away from tradition? And what are we looking at traditions?
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting about that is when looking at that, the solar arc progressed chart with moon in Scorpio, the ruler Pluto is in an air sign, Libra, and the ruler Mars is in an air sign, Aquarius. So it's again reinforcing that shift into more of an air-based.
And so is Saturn. Saturn's in Gemini. Solar arc Saturn is 17 degrees Gemini. Let me think about this, because I was thinking right now with all that Capricorn, Capricorn looks to Saturn. It's, Capricorn only has one ruler, it's Saturn. Unlike, because as we were saying earlier, it was the limit of the universe, the known universe that we could see until the outer planets were discovered. 1771, I think, for Uranus, 1846 for Neptune, and then 1930 for Pluto. So it's so fascinating. Good point. So we have the three that we're talking about, Pluto, Mars, and Saturn, are all in air signs. Boy, I can hear people honking out there. The cities must be there. There's a lot of commotion. Yeah.
A lot of celebration in this area of the country right now.
I just noticing the time, and I do need to say that tonight I'm talking with Amanda Pierce of Cosmic Collaborations, and it's a Scorpio theme. We've been interviewing, you might say, the traditional ruler of Mars and the modern ruler of Scorpio, and realizing that the two are really in a kinship of assisting us to understand these transformative times that Scorpio so intensely desires for its growth process. And next week is going to be the 14th, and I have a brand new guest, Susanna Lobier, and we will be talking about Gilgamesh. Now, Gilgamesh was the first novel, the first story, and it is about our fear of death. He's a great hero, but he finally got to that point to die or not to die. So it'll be quite fascinating. And this is November 7th. Oh, Amanda, we still have a few minutes, about a half a minute here. We don't have to hang up.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we can pull together some thoughts, my goodness, what a great introspective time about transformation, going to new realms.
Yeah, I mean, transformation can be uncomfortable, but it's always for our best.
It is. It is. You know, the Plutoids that now Pluto is the gateway to are what they were saying, lenses, and this is also from Bill Herbst, of focus and defocusing energies that actually reach beyond the galaxy. So consciously we're moving along, and I think we're uniting, and it's a birth process, right? Mars. Well,
yes,
blessings.
It is.
Next, we'll talk again next month. I think that'll be, it's in December. It'll be great fun.
It's been lovely, Sue.
Okay. And thanks to all of our fabulous, our beautiful, loving audience. Blessings.
Talk to you next month.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.